My guest this morning is Tammy G. Barlette, a pilot with over 3,000 hours, has a passion for helping others feel confident enough to dream bigger than they ever thought they could. Though internally she struggled with confidence herself, that didn't stop her from becoming one of the first to accomplish many feats in her life. A Minnesota native with no ties to aviation, she grew up with a heart to serve her country. And that is just what she did. She joined Air Force ROTC at the University of Minnesota, and the possibility of becoming a pilot was presented to her for the first time. That is where her love of aviation began. Having the opportunity to fly through the clouds, upside down, and in a formation with other aircraft sounded like the perfect job for her. Tammy completed Specialized Undergraduate Pilot Training in April of 2000, where she flew the T-37 and T-38 and was immediately assigned to be an instructor in the T-37. After training hundreds of students, the skills of aerobatics, instruments, and formation, she then moved on to fly the mighty A-10 Warthog, where she completed a remote tour to Osan Air Base, Korea. After an aircraft injury required cervical spine reconstruction, Tammy transitioned to the Arizona Air National Guard. She flew the MQ-1 Predator and the MQ-9 Reaper, accumulating over 1,500 hours of combat support time in both Iraq and Afghanistan, supporting and protecting our troops on the ground, providing real-time reconnaissance and lethal support. Tammy is also a graduate of the prestigious U.S. Air Force Weapons School, where she was the sixth to graduate out of the remotely piloted aircraft program, making her one of the first experts in this rapidly progressing field. Desiring to get back into a high-performance aircraft and having a passion to teach, Tammy then transitioned to the Air Force Reserves, instructing in the T-38 Talon for the last 6 years of her 20-year military career. Her focus was on balancing family life as a married mother of three with instructing in the fast-paced environment of the Air Force's premier fighter trainer. I know that's right. She excelled at both earning multiple awards and spearheading new programs to mentor and grow professional aviators. Additionally, while working full-time, running a business, and raising three kids, she earned her master's in Christian ministry from Piedmont International University. Tammy and her husband, who is a federal agent, reside in Tucson, Arizona, with their three children. She retired from the Air Force in 2018 after 20 years of service and now runs two businesses. She is a top leading consultant with Radon and Fields, and is also co-owner of Athena's Voice, on a mission to share the wisdom of women warriors. Welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, none other than Tammy G. Barlette. Tammy, good morning.
Good morning, Mark.
I tell you, we chatted a couple of minutes before going on, and like I said, I'm sitting here like giddy and, goosebumps and all of that, because anytime I'm talking to a pilot or anytime I'm dealing with anyone in aviation, I just get that, I just like I was sharing to you. So I am so glad that you're here. And before we even get going, when people say, I'm wearing my Air Force hat now, and a lot of times I'll wear my fatigue jacket on it that has my name and everything. And people will just come up to me and say, thank you for your service. So I'm going to start the show off after reading that Bible saying, thank you for your service.
It was an honor. And thank you for your service. And, we live in a time where people appreciate it. So it's really nice, because it hasn't always been like that. This
is true. You're absolutely right. And so, yes, the fact that people do take the time to come up and say that, it is much appreciated, because you're absolutely right. It wasn't always that way. And, the work that we do really does matter in terms of keeping the country safe and everything else. So that's the first thing. So this is where we're going to go, because the listening audience, one of the things Tammy asked me whenever I first contacted her was, well, I haven't authored a book and your show is about reading, so do I have to have the book? No, because even though the title of the show is Reading Circle, I have interesting people on the air to inspire and entertain and inform and all those things. So you don't necessarily have to have written a book. And in your case, you just don't have it on paper yet. But as far as your life goes, yeah, that's a book. So, listening audience, let me help you understand how this all came about. for those that listen regularly, you know I am an aviation or an airplane or a pilot geek. I was reading a book by Tammy Jo Schultz. The title of her book was Nerves of Steel. Matter of fact, I'm trying to get Tammy Jo on the show at some point too. And she had listed different names of women pilots that had gone through the experience in the military of becoming pilots. And one of the names that came up was something very close to Ms. Barlette's name, to Tammy's name here. So I started doing research, started going through social media, and Tammy's name popped up, and I read her bio. I said, oh, I would love to have her on the show. Reached out to her, and she said she would love to do it, and hence that's why we're here. Social media, once again, LinkedIn, helped me connect with someone, and we're on the show. So again, thank you for rising early, because listening audience, Tammy's calling out of Arizona. They're 2 hours behind us. So it's 7:10 here. It's about 5:10 there. So I am doubly thankful that she took the time to get up extremely early to do the interview. So, all right, let's go back to the beginning in terms of, like, I will start from whenever you get to the university and how you kind of join the ROTC, so forth and so on. So let's talk a little bit about that. And then especially with, being female and those kind of, and, with the military, so forth and so on, what kind of drove you into that?
Yeah, well, when I was in high school, I did a program called Post-Secondary Education Options Program my junior and senior year. So I went to college full-time, and because I was still doing sports, I chose to go to a community college. And so I was attending a community college, and there was a gentleman who had been in the Navy who was in my class. And I was always very interested in the military, but all I could think of was boot camp because that's all I knew. There's not really any military bases other than, Reserve Guard base really around Minneapolis area. And I didn't have any family members who'd been in the military more than a couple years, and that was a way long time ago. And so I just started asking him questions, and I said I was thinking about the Navy, and he said, he said, no, you need to go into the Air Force. And he's like, he said that he thought it was the cleanest, they treated their people the best, and they were a little more advanced with respect to women. And this is probably 1994 when he's talking to me. So I knew that I wanted to be an officer because I wanted to go to college. So when I got to the University of Minnesota admissions office, I was looking around and I said, hey, do you guys have Air Force ROTC? Because I didn't know. I really was fairly uninformed. And they said, yeah, I think it's in that building behind us that looks like a castle. And I kind of thought they were kidding, but they weren't because I walked around the corner and sure enough, it looks like a castle. If you Google the University of Minnesota ROTC building, you'll see it. And I kind of snooped around it like it was scary, which is so silly because I opened the door and it was just a building. So silly. But I opened the door and it's just a normal building and I walked in and I was clearly wandering around looking for something and somebody said, hey, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I'm looking for Air Force ROTC. And they said, oh, well, you come to the right place. The building, the first floor was Air Force ROTC, then it was Army on the second, Navy and Marines were on the third. So they walked me down to the Air Force ROTC office, and they said, "Oh, hey, what's your GPA? What programs are you in? And all that kind of stuff." And they said, "Yeah, we think we can definitely get you a scholarship. You can try the program. If you don't like it, you can quit." Which I know I'm not a quitter, so it's funny that this is in my story because one of my sayings is when quitting is not an option, you will find another way. And if you want, we can talk about that later. But
by all means.
I liked the idea that I had the option. Coming out of high school, you like to have choices. So I was like, well, you mean I can try it? And if I don't like it, I can leave. And so I jumped in, and that's when it all started.
All right. So, again, I agree with the recruiter or whoever your advisor or whoever would say Air Force. Because, see, that was my thinking as well because my father and my uncles, they had done Army. And again, being enamored with planes and flight, I knew right off the bat I wanted to do Air Force. Just from the fact that it was airplanes. So I knew right off I wanted to go Air Force. So, but I do agree with your advisor. Out of the four of them, and I love all of them. I mean, it's kind of like the fraternities and sororities. They're all of them great. I mean, the fact that and we all tease each other about which branch we're in. But the truth of the matter is we're all one big family. We're all on the same mission. But Air Force was my choice as well. So this is where for me, it makes it so interesting for all and you and all the female, because the fact that you're going into aviation, which was a male-dominated industry, it means you, and I'm quite sure, and because somewhere you just said in your comment, he said he thought the Air Force treated females the best out of the rest of them. So what did you meet in terms of now, or did you meet any resistance or any bad treatment or any type of anything because you were now female trying to go into, for the most part, a male-dominated area?
I didn't. So when I showed up as a cadet in the program, I had already had a bunch of college under my belt. So I was only in the program for 3 years. But within a week or two, I never looked back, because I was finally surrounded by people who cared about what they were doing, and they wanted to be better, and they were always working hard. And I didn't know that existed, because I felt like I was surrounded in high school by people who were just goofing off all the time, which there's time and place for that. I mean,
right.
You got to have fun. But I was like, I always got frustrated because we had to do the work anyway. So why so when I got to ROTC, it was just a mix. I mean, yes, there were more males. And at this point, I actually didn't know I was going to be a pilot. They told me I couldn't be. I had knee reconstruction when I was a junior in high school. And so I said, I'll be an intel officer. And I honestly don't think I even understood what that was, but it sounded cool. That's how you are as a freshman
That's
in
right.
college.
That's right.
I'm not just telling the honest truth. And
that's right.
So there I was, and I was learning. I was trying to figure out what this was all about. And I loved the energy and just people's integrity and their work ethic. And I didn't run into any trouble. Now, throughout my career, there definitely was some trouble, but I want to say it was very minimal. And there was probably a little more trouble than I ever saw, because I'm a kind of person who believes if you look for it, you're going to find it even in places it doesn't exist.
I agree.
So I didn't look for it, which means there were times that it was happening and I didn't notice it, which was better for me. The only person that wouldn't be as good for would be those coming behind me, because had I noticed, I might have been able to do something, shift things a little bit and make a bigger impact. But that's all part of our story, and what the right time and place to make those impacts and those movements.
No, absolutely. And right. And see, again, what fascinates me beyond the flight is the fact that you really are, as a female, being a trendsetter. You're kind of opening the way or paving the way for others to come behind you, as you were just talking about. And then there were some that were before you that paved the way even for you. So
absolutely, there was.
And
starting with the wasps.
Right.
If you've heard of them, yeah.
And so, again, this is what I mean. And I shared this before we went on the air, that for me, as the father of 4 daughters, no one better not ever tell anybody what they can't do if that's what they want to do, because you're female. But unfortunately, we live in a world or in a society that at one point, matter of fact, next month, March, is Women's History Month. We're coming up on that in March. There was a time when, because you were female or because you were a woman, folks were saying, no, you can't do that. And yet, I mean, like I said, I read Tammy Jo's story. You was just talking about the unit that kind of paved the way. I'm hearing your story. There are those of you out there who really do say, look, we're going to buck the trend. But at the same time, like even as I read Tammy Jo's book, in terms of her experiences of, what she experienced from men. So once you graduated and got in the military, and I love what you just said about trouble, because if you look for it, you will find it, even if it's not there. You're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more. But did they look at you and say, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Or any of those? Or was the Air Force like I would know the Air Force to be? No,
I didn't. Even back then. I mean, and looking back at the numbers, you can say I was one of the first, not one of the first pilots as a female. I was definitely on the front edge of females in fighters.
Right.
But the thing is that because the timeline, we've been flying fighters for years at that point. I didn't think of myself as one of the first, because timeline-wise, I wasn't. We had been doing it for, I can't remember what year it was with McSally and Sharon Presler, but like 1991 or 95. It was something. It was, it was already gone. Like that day was gone. So I wasn't the first. So I thought, I didn't even know, honestly, because I joined the military ROTC program in 1995. I didn't even know that restriction was even there. So I might have been one of few, but, I didn't think about that. And when I showed up in ROTC, it wasn't it wasn't a problem at all as being a female. I didn't think. I didn't even notice it. Then I got to pilot training, and yes, I was one of few. And the only person who I think it was a problem for was me sometimes, thinking that it was a problem. And that was just something I had to get over in my own head. I was never, in my opinion, never treated differently, with the exception of a couple comments of, when I did eventually get selected to go down the fighter track midway through pilot training, there was one or two jokesters in the class that would say, "Oh, you just got it because you're a girl."
Right.
And that's never easy to hear, because you want to earn it, right?
Right.
And looking back, I know that wasn't the case. There was no quota anyone was filling, but even the idea that was the case was like, it took credit from me and my work.
Correct.
Which was a little frustrating, but I just kept going, because that's just one voice. It's like taking a test of 100 questions, getting one wrong, and you focus on that one, even though you got a 99. So you just can't do that. You can't focus on that one person who's saying that one thing.
So, listening audience, if you've just joined me, I hope you've been with me since 6, but certainly since 7. And my guest this morning is Tammy G. Barlette, and she is a former fighter pilot. Because I was telling Tammy before we went on the air, it's one thing to be a pilot and you fly the big birds like the 737s and the 740s, the commercial jets. And in the Air Force, we have the KC-135. It's one thing to fly those. It's another thing to start flying fighter jets. When you start getting into F-15s, F-16s, F-4s, Warthogs, when you start getting into those are jets. That's not a regular airplane. That's a jet that goes extremely fast. And I think in your bio, when you're talking about flipping upside down and this and that, what is it like to be sitting behind? Because I've sat in the cockpit on the ground. I've sat in the F-4 with the engines running on the ground, and I could feel that energy. But what is it like when you actually up in there and you're doing all these acrobatics and aerobatics and, like the Top Gun stuff? What is that like? What does that feel like?
It's awesome. I mean, when I was a kid, like I said, I wasn't thinking about being a pilot. I didn't know any pilots. I always thought I could be whatever I wanted to be. Honestly, that's how I was raised. But I didn't consider it because I didn't know anyone. But I loved roller coasters. I loved climbing trees. And, to get up in the jet like that and get to go upside down and, pull negative G's where you kind of float in the air,
Right.
It's awesome.
No, it has to be. And I'll tell you what, because even on the ground, whenever I worked on the engines, we would have to go out on the flight line. As a matter of fact, sometimes we would actually serve a couple of roles, work with the crew chiefs and so forth and so on. But to be out on the flight line with just the engines running around you, I mean, for me, I would tell folks, I can't explain it. So I can't, if I couldn't explain just being around the running jet, I can't imagine what it would be like to try to explain what it's like to be the operator of it.
You really can't. And I think that it's interesting because in pilot training, you're so focused on what you have to do that a lot of times, well, even I would say throughout my entire career, I'm such a perfectionist and trying to do everything right, which being a perfectionist is not very helpful as a pilot, to be quite honest. There's no perfect flights ever. But I was very hard on myself, and that's, I think part of the reason that I got where I got. But you don't always stop to enjoy the beauty of what's really happening around you. And my office view every day was phenomenal. And, it might be rainy and cloudy on the ground, but I get above the clouds and it's beautiful. The sun's there. I mean, and then, on those days where you have, puffy clouds in the sky, we would call it cloud chasing. And especially in the T-37 where the turn radius is much smaller, we could kind of go around and through the clouds. And my absolute favorite thing to do, though, was fly in formation. Like, I loved formation. I love being part of a team, part of a group, and flying formation is like dancing in the sky.
Right.
So when I first started learning formation, when we're doing close formation, so fingertip position where the wingtips are 3 feet separation, and you're going up to 90 degrees of bank. When you're flying off someone else's aircraft and you go to 90 degrees of bank, it's funny because you think you're going to fall right into them just because our minds are so in tune with what happens on the ground. And that eventually went away, but I remember at first thinking, isn't this plane just going to fall right on top of the other one as we're 90 degrees and we're above them? And as an instructor, years later, you don't even think about it. It's just, how the plane operates and how it works. But it was just so exhilarating. And then, separating and doing rejoins, using angles, and, overtake and controlling speed. It was so much fun.
And like I said, I don't think words can adequately do it. I know they can't because I've tried to, like, people look at me like I have three heads when I say, oh, no, you just don't know what it was like for me to be down. Because I was stationed out of McGuire Air Force Base here in New Jersey. I said, you don't know what it was like for me to be out there on the flight line or either to be buckling pilots into their jet or, coming up the ladder, down the ladder, either sitting there. People look at me like, what? I don't get, like, but for people who are in aviation, they get it. They know what I'm talking about. Yeah. But words really do not adequately describe the experience. But not only were you had an opportunity to actually be over in Iraq and to do some support missions. Now, what was that like? Because now you're in the battleground.
Well, that's actually not the case. So my first combat assignment, was Osan Air Base in Korea.
Okay.
So, you fly up on the DMZ, and that's considered combat because of it's armistice. But my combat time is combat support time, which is how you read it on the bio.
Right.
So that was me sitting in Tucson or Las Vegas, controlling an aircraft that was in either Afghanistan or Iraq. And oftentimes I would fly one in each. I'd go in to work. I'd pick up a plane that was in Afghanistan, hand it off to somebody else, go take a break, go pick up a plane that was in Iraq, hand that off to somebody else, go home, sleep with my kids, the house with my kids, and it's just crazy. But I actually have never been over there. The closest I did go to a couple conferences at LUD, but that's the closest I got. Which it's interesting because it's one of those things that you kind of have a fear. You're like, that's a little scary, and if you don't think it is, then I think there's something wrong, honestly.
Right.
But there's also that drive in you that's like, I want to go be there. That's my job. So never getting to go, I did feel like a little bit like I didn't do my job. But then I have to remember all the people that I trained and all the people that I helped that, did physically go there and
so now
it still made an impact.
Oh, I'm sure. Did you or do you get asked the question, were you considered a tomboy as a youngster?
I think some people do ask that. And I would say no, not at all. I mean, I was never a girly girl. Like, I didn't wear high heels and play with dolls and wear pink. But I also think that I grew up at a time where women were kind of starting to, like, I feel like it was almost looked down upon to be so feminine. So, like, I didn't want to wear pink, and it's interesting because now that I'm older and I want to embrace that femininity because I realize we can be powerful and feminine at the same time. I'm okay wearing pink, but I felt like at that time I had kind of prove a little bit. So I didn't wear. I know that's kind of. I mean, it's not just about wearing pink, but the whole idea, that concept. But no, I wasn't a tomboy. I was just your average. I was kind of the athletic kid who was friends with everybody. Yeah.
So when you get to college, you go to ROTC, you had no idea you wanted to be a pilot.
No,
and
no idea.
What drew you to doing it? I guess somebody explained it to you, or what drew you to it?
Well, I have to say that, it was one of those things that's what you did. People are like, you going to be a pilot? And I said, I can't. I had knee surgery. You going to be a pilot? Everybody would ask that if you're in Air Force ROTC.
Exactly.
That was the question.
That's right.
And I'll be honest, as I'm well known for being very honest. I think my ego was involved a little bit. I want to do the cool thing. I mean, we're human, right?
Right. That's correct.
And so I thought, well, I went to field training, which is like ROTC's version of boot camp. So I was down at Lackland Air Force Base in the summer, going through a month program,
Lackland.
Super fun. Yeah, living in the barracks. That was awesome.
I know Lackland well.
And they had this. Our field training was the biggest they'd ever had at the time. There was 20 flights, so there was a couple hundred cadets, and there was one pilot they brought in for this, 1 hour career day briefing. And he happened to look at me in the crowd, and he said, "Are you going to be a pilot?" And I said, "I can't. I had knee surgery." And he goes, here's a waiver for everything. And that's when it started. So I went back, and I went to my ROTC detachment, and I said, "Hey, this pilot said there's a waiver for everything." So there almost is. I mean, not everything. Just can't blanket things. But That's something people should remember, because I learned even at 20 years leaving the Air Force, I was like, oh, there's a waiver for that?
Right. Like there's an app for that. There's a waiver for that. That's
you
right.
You can waive almost everything with the right approval. But I found out they were wrong at my detachment. It was such a common surgery, that ACL reconstruction, I didn't even need a waiver. So had he not said that to me, I would be on a completely different path, that pilot.
Wow.
So it was really just kind of...
So now that you said it, probably there was a waiver for my eyesight as well, because I don't think it was that bad. But in any event, in terms of the academics, I was sharing online, I always had this perception that you had to be like really good in math in order to be able... I mean, what type of academics, or as you're going through training, for those in the listening audience who have children, or you're in school, or might be thinking about going that way, what are the academics like?
This is great information, because I think it's important to know. I always like to say there's three false truths, or things people believe about pilots that aren't true. That we're good at math, we're not afraid of heights, and we have perfect eyesight. So I would say, I'll start with the last one, perfect eyesight. There's waivers for everything. There's different rules. If you have astigmatism, blah, blah, blah. But always ask, okay?
Right.
The not afraid of heights thing, I would say, I'm not afraid of heights, but I am afraid of falling. So when I'm in control in the plane, not a problem. But you put me on the edge of the Grand Canyon, I'm not happy. I'm not, it's a control thing, I think, but, whatever. So if you're afraid of the Grand Canyon, it doesn't mean you're going to be afraid in an airplane. And then the math one you're asking about. When I was in the highest math growing up, I always loved math. Well, I wouldn't say I loved math, but I liked it because it was challenging. It was a puzzle, and there was an answer. You do this, and there's an answer. It's not this vague, like, write a give you a grade, and we like it. So I kind of liked that. And when I went to college in high school, so I left. I was supposed to be in trigonometry my junior year, and when I went to the community college, they didn't have a class called trigonometry. And I had no one really helping me, which is kind of strange, but I didn't know what to take, so I didn't take anything. And I had to take a math. Between those 2 years, I had to take one, and I did end up taking one or two math classes, but I never did. I got a little bit into trig my senior year, but that was it. Never took calculus. It did make it much more difficult when I got to the AFOQT, the Air Force Officer Qualification Test, which categorizes, I don't know exactly how they do it nowadays, but it gave me scores in navigator, pilot, all these different categories. And there were questions on there, like sine, cosine, and I just had to guess because I didn't even know what to do with that.
Right.
And I still, I did well enough in other areas that it made up for it, because you do have to score fairly well. Your academics do have to be pretty high. But like I tell everyone, try and then try again.
Correct.
Just don't give up.
Absolutely. So as you're going, at any point, did you feel like, I really don't know this, I'm not going to make it? And I know the answer to that, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I mean, because a lot of times folks, from what I understand, flight training and just learning everything that goes on is grueling. Oh, yeah.
It is. I think that was when I really first understood the comment, drinking from a fire hose. You can get a couple sips and the rest of it's going to go right by you, and they'll constantly ask you, you're supposed to know that, we told you that, but yet that was some of the water that went right by you, right? You're like, right. Oh boy. But you're held to the expectation as if you should know it all. And that's a battle right there, because it's kind of I think you have to learn a little bit of a emotional control there as well, because it's frustrating. You're like, but I can't learn all of this, in a day. Not that it's a day, it's a year-long program. But, it's that way for a reason. And in my opinion, some of that is it's in the program to simulate stress.
Correct.
So there's lots of ways they simulate stress. But,
correct.
But as an instructor, looking back, I was an instructor in pilot training for a total of, I want to say, 8 or 9 years. And I cannot shoot at you. I cannot, hurt your aircraft intentionally. I can't put you in those stressful situations, but I can do things like ask you a lot of questions to the point where I know you're not going to know everything, see how you react, and your reaction is part of my grade. Can you handle it? There were times with students that I would be talking at the most inopportune moments during the flight, and they would be thinking, what an idiot. Why is this instructor talking to me right now? Not realizing it was an intentional move.
Right.
Just to stress them out, because we need to see how they perform. And that was a progression. I didn't do that right away. Once they get to a certain level, then we do that. But as a student, it's very uncomfortable, and I didn't understand that. I even remember an instructor laughing at me in the jet. He
Correct.
just kept giggling, and I was like, finally, like 2 years later, when I was an instructor and I was actually instructing, in the same flight as him, we were talking, and he said something. And I said, I didn't really enjoy flying with you. And he's like, what? He was really surprised because most people do. I said, you just sat there and you laughed at me. And he goes, I was laughing at you because you were so hard on yourself, and it was hilarious because you were doing so well, but you were just beating yourself up. But I didn't know that.
Right.
So,
Well, it's interesting that you would say that, because whenever I came out of basic training, when I came out of school and everything, for the life of me, as we were going through, I could not understand, why is it so important that we fold our underwear in 6-inch squares? Why is it that our hangers, our hangers and our closets had to be equally spaced, so far and so on. But it dawned on me after getting out, the beauty of the whole thing is exactly what you said. They're getting us prepared for, if we were, we would have, our flight would be marching along and another flight would be going the other direction. A drill sergeant would throw his voice to see if we responded to his voice and not our own drill sergeant's voice. So it dawned on me after I got out, I said, they were preparing us that if we were in a chaotic situation, they wanted to see how we respond. Exactly what you just said. That was the conclusion I came to, that they were putting us in these situations. Literally, when they come out to our drawers, they would have the rules, they would measure. I can remember vividly having one hair on my drawer, because we had the white towel on the bottom to have all our things laid out in order, and I had one hair, and then the sergeant flipped it. Just flipped everything out of there, and at that point, I didn't use my electric razor anymore. But what it showed me was the attention to detail, the ability, like you said, follow instructions, the ability to operate in a chaotic environment, the ability to act on instinct versus panicking. That the training,
you don't realize. Yeah, until I got out, I really didn't think about the fact that there's so many jobs and so many things that we did in the military that dealt with lethal things.
Right.
Whether it was something that could potentially kill someone else or you, even to the guy who, how important is it that the guy who puts your parachute together folds it properly? What about the guy who's loading up the ammunition at the end of he's pulling the pins on my jet at the end of the runway so he arms me up just before I leave. There's so many things that are life or death. You cannot. That's where that comes from. Can you follow instructions? Can you, because every little thing matters. Not in every job, but for the most part, it matters.
No, you're absolutely right. And I shared with you again before we went in, I'm the principal of a school, and my students, they get that from me all the time, attention to detail. And I share with them, when I was a jet engine mechanic, they would constantly get into us that if the tech order tells you to turn the screw to the right and you turn the screw to the left and that plane goes up and crashes because you didn't safety wire it right or you didn't turn the screw the right way according to the tech order, they can come back after you. Because they log, they know exactly everyone who works on those jets at what time, so forth and so on. So I try to help them understand, like you just said, attention to detail regardless of the job, because the jobs that you think really don't matter really do matter. Something like you just said, the parachute. Everybody has to play their part, and they have to do it well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'm looking
That's
at...
why, I mean...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, there's so many steps in the process. Even that's why when the pilot gets in the jet, we check everything. Even if something should never move,
right,
we're still checking that switch is in the right spot and that literally bolt is there. There's certain things that you actually check for. I mean, I'm not going to count bolts on the plane. That doesn't make sense. But we look for missing bolts and things that are popped and things that are leaking and things that look wrong. And just to back up everyone else.
You're absolutely right. There's another book that I'm reading by a female pilot. Her name is Carolyn Johnson, I believe. I think it's...
Oh, yeah, Fly Girl?
Yeah, exactly. Jet Girl, that's right. So Jet Girl. She does a scenario in there of getting ready to take off on the aircraft carrier, and she's looking down now at the, I guess the... whatever their rank is in the Navy, not ensign or whatever, I forget whichever. But anyway, the kid that's down there getting ready to launch her. And she looks down and sees, again, a little growth on the face. And when she says in the book that she's thinking in her mind, I hope he was better with whatever he was doing on her aircraft than he was with a Bic. I read that excerpt to my students. I said, do you see how people think in terms of how doing your job is connected to their job? I said, because this woman is sitting in a multi-million-dollar aircraft. She looks down at the kid that's getting ready to launch her. And her mind is thinking, if I see that stubble on his face, did he do what he was supposed to do correctly on my aircraft?
Yeah.
So it's absolutely right. So I'm sitting here, what I was going to say a couple minutes ago, I'm sitting here looking at your website as the pictures scroll through. There's some great shots, great pictures on here. As I'm looking through here, I see you in the flight uniform and the jet suit and everything. I mean, really great shots. Your marriage, I look at your husband, your kids, and everything. Do you ever run into a situation whenever people figure out or know what you did or do, or they see the picture of you in a flight suit and they're like shocked?
Yeah, more common than not, I would say.
I am not surprised. We're going to transition a little bit into what you're doing with Athena's Voice.
Okay.
Tammy's also the co-originator or the originator of a group called Athena's Voice. And we were talking off the air. I was sharing with her that I'm the father of 4 daughters, and I am all for females doing whatever it is they feel they can do. In my mind, there is no such thing as a male-only or a female-only task or job. Because first off, as I was growing up as a kid, the way my parents raised me and my sister was there were no gender chores. I ironed, I washed dishes, I vacuumed floors, I dusted, I did anything that's so-called, and my sister, vice versa. She could take out the garbage if need be, or anything that was considered boy chores. Like in my household, chores were gender neutral. There was no. So first, and the second thing is I was growing up. That's whenever the women's lib movement was really coming about, to burn your bras and so forth and so on. That was back there in the late '60s, early '70s. Where women were burning their bras to show that, you know what, we can drive trucks and fly jets and do what we want to do as well. Then having now fathered 4 girls, truly it was like, no one is going to stop you because you're female. So I was talking to Tammy before we went on the air about that, and that's what is my understanding Athena's Voice is all about. So let's talk a little bit about that and how it came about.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because a couple years before I was going to retire, I started a business with Rodan and Fields. So I do market expansion with it's the number 1 skincare brand in America. So something I never thought I would do. In fact, I was a little hesitant because, what's a fighter pilot doing selling skincare? Because I was still active duty. But I wanted to set myself up for success so that when I retired, I could work on my own terms when I wanted, from wherever I wanted, and I wouldn't have to go get another job, desk, and we wouldn't feel it financially. And so that's where I was setting myself up for success with that business. And it went very well, and I love it, and I still work with that business. But my husband looks at me and he says, I know what you're going to do when you retire. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to run my Rodan and Fields business. And he said, and then I kind of looked at him like, okay, what? He goes, motivational speaking. And I looked at him like he was nuts because all I could think of was that, that stress you get before you go out, and talk to a group of people.
Oh, wow. And this is coming from someone who flies jets.
I know. See, and we can get to that. That's my one of my speech topics. But it was like, really? And I had never considered it. Looking back, I've learned that pretty much everyone, even big-time speakers, have that feeling before they go out on stage. It doesn't.
No, they do.
They shouldn't be doing it.
Now, see, it's funny you bring that up because at the college level, that's what I teach is public speaking. And that's why I laughed whenever you just said that, because in all honesty, one of the first things I say whenever we open class in the semester is people would rather literally die than to get up in front of a group of people. And that's not figurative speaking. People would rather die than to get up and say, and I would tell people, I can be in the middle of Yankee Stadium or whatever, the biggest stadiums filled with folks, it would not faze me. Now, to your point, what you were just saying, one of the things that we say in the class is, yes, you should have some butterflies in the beginning, but as you progress into your speech or you've given your welcome comments or whatever, the butterfly should go away. So my thing I always tell students is if you don't have those when you get up, it's a chance for disaster because that means you're overconfident, you're cocky, I got this. And usually when you come up there with that kind of attitude, that's when things kind of go awry. But in terms of when you first get, even now, and I do public speaking, I teach public speaking, I'm on radio. Even now, when I have to give a talk, I still get that little churn until I've launched, until I've said whatever I need to say to open up. So that part, you're absolutely right. But I just found it interesting that this is somebody, you're talking about stress. Somebody that's flying multi-million-dollar aircraft saying the stress of getting up to speak.
Yeah, it's human. It
is.
Yep. And so he said that, and I was like, but they say if you have a little fear, you're not sure. I mean, that's probably the path you should take. Don't take the easy path. That's not your path. Someone's already walked that path. You need to find your own. And so, he said that, and I actually looked at him and said, "Have you ever even heard me speak?" And, in front of a group, because obviously, as an Air Force officer, as a pilot, we speak all the time. I mean, that's one of the things every day. And so he goes, "Well, no, but And I think what it really came from was he would watch people as they listened to me just talk and tell stories of things of experiences I had that they had never, they were like, wow. And to me, it was just me talking about something I'd done. And he just saw how they were interested and how they wanted me to keep talking. And he thought, you need to share your message, not for the sake of me, but for the sake of others.
Correct. And
I sat on it for a while. And at first I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not really interested in being like in the limelight. In fact, I don't really like being in the limelight. I would much rather be on the stage with a group of people than alone.
Right.
But you can't tell. I mean, unless you're really creative, you can't really tell your story on stage with a group of people. So I paid attention as I spoke over the next probably 2 years, and realized that the impact I made was worth it, because when I was done, a lot of times people will come up to me and say, thank you for being so authentic. Thank you for just saying it like it is. Thank you. And I'm like, I'm just talking. I'm not trying to be up there to get any attention. I was just sharing a message. And that's why they liked it, and they appreciate it, because it wasn't about me, and it never is about me. It's always about what can I do to help someone else.
Right.
When someone asks me, what is your passion? I never say, oh, I love, doing triathlons, or I love knitting, or whatever it is. The only thing that comes to mind is I love helping people. If I can help someone anytime, anywhere, anyhow, I'm going to try and do it. And so I was like, well, I felt like it was a bit of a disservice for me to have this 20-year career in the military kind of paving the way, and then to go off and just hide.
Right.
Not that I would be hiding, but not sharing my story. Because at pilot training as a student, and then, 15, 16 years later when I was there again, same base, the numbers were the same. The treatment was a little bit, it was better, but it was still kind of the same. And I thought, you know what? Part of the problem is because a lot of women tend to retire and they go take care of their family, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I'm doing that right now as well, because I work from home. But if they don't share their story, no one ever knows. And just like me as a kid, I didn't even consider flying, not because I didn't think I could, but because I'd never seen anyone. And sometimes seeing is believing.
Right.
So I thought we need to get out there. We need to share our stories. Because like a lot of the WASPs, people don't even know about them. They just went back to being whoever they were before, and no one ever knew. And a lot of people still don't know about them today. So if you're hearing this and you hear me say the WASPs, look up World War II WASPs. You'll be
correct.
Amazed. But yeah, so I did some research and found Heather Lucky Penny, who was out there speaking, and I said, how do you do this? And her and I decided that very quickly we needed to, she wasn't just going to tell me, mentor me and I was going to be on my way. She's like, we need to start a business, and we need to get more women out there, because there's men out there talking to men and women about leadership and decision-making and perseverance and all those things that we need to help people with. Women can be out there talking to men and women. So although we do have an extra heart for young girls and women, we speak to both genders.
That's right.
It's important that we do that.
In terms of what you were saying,
speaking business, yeah.
Right. In terms of what you were saying about making life better for others, to be honest with you, that's why we were put on the planet. And if more people would realize that, the world would be a better place. It really would. It's not about me, my, get, stuff. It's really not. It is about making life better for someone else. And if everybody was doing that, everyone's life would be made better, because just like I'm making life better for somebody else making life better for me. It would just keep rolling along. Everybody's life would be made because everybody's helping each other. So that's really why we're put on the planet to begin with. And you're absolutely right in terms of exposure. That's one of the reasons why I think since September through now, I've probably had about 20 different guest speakers come in and address my students. Because for my students, most of it is exactly what you just said. I've never been exposed to it. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know I could do it even if I wanted to do it. And even if I wanted to do something, I didn't know it existed. And now I have somebody standing in front of me who does it. And that's why I was sharing with you earlier, whenever the United Airlines captain came in, I was as giddy as the kids.
And you realize that they're just human. They're just like you talked about. You're scared standing up in front of people, but you could fly a jet. Yeah, I mean, you go to our website and go to my page and look at my 5-minute intro to my main keynote, and you'll see I struggled with that, and now I talk about that, because it's important. I mean, people were like, "Wait, that you were nervous?" I'm like, "Heck yeah, I was nervous." I just decided to go forward anyways.
Right.
The difference of, are you going to go forward anyways? It's not, do you not have, you must not have that fear. Oh yeah, I have the fear. I'm just going to go.
Right. And that's another message people need to understand. Don't think because you have the fear that ought to stop you in your tracks. I mean, that's what courage is all about. I was just reading that over the last couple of days. Courage is all about, and I think it's in Carly Fiorina's book. I'm reading her. I mean, I read so many books, it's not funny, but I just love reading. That's a passion. But I think it's in Carly Fiorina's book and some other books. They're saying that the whole courage thing is, that's not saying you weren't afraid to do it to begin with. It just meant that in spite of your fear, you did it. Exactly what you're just saying. So is that, all right, the video you were just talking, is that the one with you in the blue? Tammy, social courage in the work environment?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm on your site now, so I can see everything that you're talking about.
Yeah, basically what I learned over my 20-year career, I mean, obviously there's tons of things that I learned, but what I was really passionate about is that I was really hesitant and what I call in the area of social courage. So you can think of courage, it's the moral or mental strength to withstand danger, difficulty, or fear. So, yeah, danger, like physical danger, that's how people think of as courage. But fear and difficulty they're not limited to life-threatening situations. Like social situations, just like you talked about, are more threatening to people in a lot of situations, and they're very fearful. And so I would go take off in my jet and be fine. I mean, yeah, there was still some fear, but when it came to a social situation, especially being the only female in the squadron, I was very fearful of, how I was being looked at. And I hate that I'm very conscious of what do other people think. I hate that. But I recognize that I'm like that, and I just overcome, because you can't run around your life worrying about that. So I just keep doing. But there were definitely situations where I didn't raise my hand in class and ask the question, and it hurt me. But what I learned, as much as we can tell people to push, and be brave and step out of your comfort zone, go for it. We all have a different level of social courage, social risk that we're willing to accept. And when I got to an environment where they kind of met me more in the middle, where they weren't it wasn't quite as harsh an environment. It was still a tough environment. So you can be tough and caring at the same time, and I think that's the key. So they were really tough, but they were more open to not judging everything and going, hey, you don't understand this, but let's explain it. Because I had been in so many environments that would say, oh, ask any questions, and then you did, and people were like, oh, what an idiot. I can't believe they didn't know that. I mean, I can go on and on all that, but the bottom line was that I started to really flourish, and I really started to grow, and that's when I came out of my shell and started to do. I mean, I obviously accomplished lots of things, but that's when I started to feel like my full potential was being used, when I felt safe enough to go, hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? Hey, I have a question. I have an idea. When people feel like they can do that, your organization can grow exponentially. But if there's that muted, if you're muted like that because people are like, ooh, what is this, leadership going to say? I'm not going to bring that up, and everybody's silent,
No, you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you why, because as a leader, with my staffs, we have a green light culture. In other words, they can come to me and they can present any idea, any technique, strategy, tactic that they think is going to work with the kids. And most of the time, I will say, go forth and prosper. Every now and again, I might know something that they don't know in terms of the district or the government or whatever. That I say, no, we can't do that. But most of the time, it's like, if you bring the idea to me, yep, you willing to head it up? Let me know what support you need, what resources you need. Let's see if we can do it. So it really does make a difference. And in terms of the questioning, we always say there's no such thing as a dumb question. You might get a dumb answer, but there's no such thing as a dumb question. And a lot of people really do feel exactly as you described. The next thing is, and this is what we tell the students all the time, is that same question that you're not asking, there are other students in the room had that same question too, and they're not asking either. So usually what happens is the person who asks it now has relieved everybody else. I was going to ask that same question.
I have a funny story about that, actually. So when I got selected to go to weapons school, I knew that if I did my standard, wait until the class is over and then go ask somebody I trust the question, I wasn't going to keep up. I needed to keep up in class. And I knew from enough experience that the questions that I had were probably everybody else's questions, but it didn't make it any easier. So when I got to weapons school, I made this pact with myself, if you can really do that. And I said, if I have a question, I'm raising my hand and I'm asking it. And I remember sitting in class that first time, and there was a lot of class, 10 hours of academics in our blues for, I don't know. And so I had a question. I thought, okay, I've made a deal. If you just make it black and white, you just do it. Okay, so I'm just going to do it. So I raised my hand, I asked my question. Another question comes up. I'm like, oh boy, okay. So I raised my hand and asked a question. And I asked my questions, and almost every time after class, they were all males in my class except for me, they would come up to me, and one of the guys would always go, I'm so glad you asked that question.
That's right.
The same thing. And they just kind of learned that, I guess, I was going to ask all the questions, and I just kind of owned it and just went with it. So we're good.
No, it's absolutely right. I mean, it's 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, somebody else in the room has that same question. Or either they don't understand that same concept and are sitting there doing exactly what you're saying. Well, I don't want to ask. But I'm to the point. This is, again, I always share what I tell it. I said, look, your teacher is getting paid to answer your questions. And if they answer it and you still don't understand, ask again, because now it is incumbent upon the teacher to say it in another way. Mm-hmm. And if the second time that they ask it, you still didn't get it, guess what? Ask it again, because now guess what? They have to come up with a third way to try to. At the end of the day, that's what teachers are here for. So I always tell them, do not be afraid to ask questions. Don't worry about looking silly. Don't worry, because again, your classmates are sitting around you with the same question. So,
and my speech, even though it talks about, it does address obviously being brave and asking those questions.
Right.
It's the idea of the leadership or the organization in creating an environment around everyone where it helps meet them in the middle. Meaning, you kind of work on not saying things like, "Oh, I can't believe you didn't know." Like people say that they're trying to be nice. Like, "I can't believe you didn't know that," but instantly that makes that other person go, "Oh boy." Okay,
yeah, exactly.
Oh, I mean, I'm an idiot.
That shuts folks down. That's right.
Yeah, stuff like that in your environment can help people feel like they're, it's okay, No,
that's we do a lot of work on, I guess, whatever the buzzword now, social emotional learning, restorative practices, but we've been doing a big focus on that. And a big piece of both of those initiatives or ways of life, if you will, is word choice. Word choice, body language, tone, all those different things, because it really does shut people down. Now, if I'm asking you a question, obviously I didn't know it, and now you've made me feel worse because saying you didn't know that. Well, if I knew that, I wouldn't be asking you. But
well, what's interesting is that I feel like a little bit of our generation professionally has, we raise people, we're tough, right? But we tell people, oh, you can ask any question. But then they ask a question and we're like, I can't believe you didn't know that.
Right.
And so here we're talking out of both sides of our mouth.
Correct.
And so then you got the millennials coming up asking questions, and, a lot of people in our generation are calling them whiners, and fine, whatever. But in my opinion, they're going, no, hey, I don't get it.
Right.
I don't get why you're doing it this way.
Right.
They're actually brave enough to go, hey, let's fix this. And, we're labeling them whiners when they're, maybe in some instances they are, but I would say in the most part, they're probably just trying to fix things. To make it better.
Correct. So, all right, tell us a little bit about, because we're coming close to the end of our time together, which I have enjoyed immensely. Like I said, if you were to walk in the room, right, I'm already in, for whatever reason, I'm already in awe of pilots as it is. And then I take it up another notch when it's a female pilot, and then up another notch when it's a fighter pilot. So if you walked in the room right now, I would be just spellbound. But in terms of Athena's voice, because I see it's giving other women warriors a voice. And we were talking about exposure a little bit ago, but again, you never know, even somebody listening to this interview on the radio or who will listen in the archive, you never know when it may inspire to say, if Tammy can do it, I can do it. And this goes back to what you were saying earlier about, making life better for somebody else. Like, it's really not about me, but, I can serve as an inspiration or a model for you, or at least if nothing else, kick off what I just said. If it can happen for Tammy, it can happen for me.
Yeah.
So in terms of Athena's voice, tell us a little bit about, because what I do at the last part of the interview is I give folks an opportunity to promote. You have the opportunity to promote as much as you like, anything about you. The only thing you couldn't say is dollar amounts, because that when people get in touch with you, they can figure all that out then. But the only thing you really can't say on the air is what it costs and this, that, and the other. But anything short of that, you get a chance to promote. So you have a chance to promote your, what is the skincare business name?
Oh, that's Rodan and Fields.
Rodan and Fields or Athena's, anything, like I said, with the exception of price, you have the opportunity. You can shout out your kids, your husband, the Air Force, whatever you want to do. I'm going to turn the mic off and I'm going to turn it over to you, and you have a chance to promote. I don't know. Is Athena's Voice something like, it's not a charitable organization where folks donate to or anything like that? It's not that.
Nope, it's a business. Yep,
it's a business. Okay.
We have 13 female fighter pilots that we send out into the world to speak to organizations, associations, at conferences, at schools, colleges, wherever, basically to share the wisdom of women warriors using the lessons we've learned over our time in the military. And currently it's all female fighter pilots. Our goal is actually, in the future, we would like to represent women, like women of the military, all services, all branches, all ranks, because, you could be, an airman in the Air Force with one stripe and have amazing stories and an amazing lesson that you can share. But we tell our stories on the stage, and we teach lessons that are helpful to the organization we're with. So we customize our speeches to work with whatever organization or corporation or whatever we're working with, and whatever their challenges are. We match them with the speaker that makes the most sense. We have meetings with them, and we help share the message that they're trying to get out through stories that we have, because we all have a lot of stories, and people learn best through stories. And so we tailor our message to help change that organization. So we want to make an impact. We don't just want people to walk away inspired. We want them to walk away feeling like they can be transformed if they execute whatever it is that we I've learned recently I shouldn't use that word, but we use it in the military a lot, like execute the mission.
Right.
In that sense. So that's what we do, and we just want to get, the wisdom of these ladies out there. Like I said, right now we're currently just female fighter pilots because that's who me and my business partner are fighter pilots, and that was a known quantity, people we're connected with. So that's pretty cool, but eventually we do want to expand. If there's anyone out there listening that's interested, we're not actually adding right now, but if you contact me, I can put you on the list. If people are interested in having us speak, they can reach us either at our website, which is athenasvoiceusa.com, and that's Athena as in the goddess of wisdom and war, or inspire@athenasvoiceusa.com is the email address.
All right. Well, like I said, I couldn't imagine, after hearing one. As a matter of fact, while we're on this, if any of the other women in the organization want to come on the show, please connect them with me. I'll be more than happy to have them come on, and because you all have stories to me that yes, they are inspirational and executional in terms of it could tip somebody off to dream. They go like, wow, wow, she's done that. And if she's done it, then you know what? There's hope for me, or I can go down that track. My hope for my kids that I work with every day is that somebody coming in there will do something that will trigger their career path Now, they may not stay in it forever, but they will come back and say, you know what, this person came to my school. This lady, Tammy Barlette, came to my school. And because she came, that set me on this path to be, just like you said, the advisor or whatever it was said, do Air Force, or the young man who said, there's a waiver for everything. I'm looking for those transformational, life-changing people to come in, and they don't even realize they're being that. They don't
we also, you mentioned schools. We have a give back option where if someone hires us for a fee, we will speak to, as long as it's time frame within within a day of the actual other event. Right. We will speak to a school or a charity, someone who couldn't actually hire us. Okay. So we'll do basically a 2-for-1 for that event, because we realize that not everyone can, not everyone can pay fees for this, but it's important. So, because we have the messages, like you're saying, the inspirational, where inspire people. We also, you'd be surprised at how relatable our experiences flying and our leadership experiences is to corporations, and we can bring in a different spin to corporations, organizations, and they go, oh, yeah, I can see why that makes sense, or you can help us here, or whatever.
No, absolutely. Prior to going into education, I did 15 years in corporate America, and I read a lot of books as a leader, either military or sport. I read a lot of football coach books. I read a lot of fighter pilot books. I read a lot of military books, because it is definitely connected from a leadership perspective. So even though now I'm running a school, I'm still reading books on football coaches and military leaders and pilots and so forth and so on, because the principles are transferable.
Yep, absolutely.
So I'm not surprised that the CEOs and all those folks are saying, oh, yeah, I could see that work. I'm not surprised at that at all, because, as a matter of fact, that's, to me, I think, as we were talking military earlier, I'm not necessarily a proponent of like every kid must go to war or have to fight. But I do think in terms of the experience of boot camp and basic training, I do think just about every kid could benefit from that, because the organization and the attention to detail, the following of directions and all that you learn in there, it stays with you for your lifetime. So, a lot of that, I tell folks most of what I do and where I'm coming from in terms of how I'm leading my schools is a combination of corporate, religious, fraternal, I'm trying to think of education, like all of that is rolled up in there together. Military, all that's right. So whenever the students or the teachers see me come out in a certain way, they realize my background. They're like, okay, we see why he's like that. Like, and for our morning ritual and routine, the first 15 minutes, my students is their time, 8 to 8:15. As long as they're not killing each other or tearing the building down, they have free range because they're eating their breakfast sort of. But at 8:15, I do like their signal. I tap on a bongo, and they know once I start tapping on that bongo, conversations cease. Tables are clean, conversation cease from 8:15 to 8:30. That's my time, and like so we've gotten that down. But all of that again comes from military experience, religious experience, fraternal experience, corporate experience, so forth and so on. But so that's where I'm saying all that to say the experiences would be a great thing for our youth and our children. And then again, as I said, when somebody like you walk in and they're exposed to people that has been through school, because that's the other thing for me when I get people in is for them to connect the dots with academics. Like, okay, this is why you need to learn as much as you can so that you can go be what you want to be. Anything you want to do, you can go do it with your education. But so I have enjoyed our time together this morning. Again, thank you for rising so early. Like I said, I love the pictures on you. I'm looking at the one now with you in the leather jacket, jeans in front of the old aircraft. Love the picture.
We did all those at Pima Air and Space Museum in Tucson, Arizona. They were very gracious. They let us have a run of the place. And if anyone gets a chance to go out to Pima Air and Space Museum, you should absolutely do it. It's awesome.
Now, are any of your pilots listening? Are you all locally based in Arizona, or do you have the women from all over the country?
I am the only one here. We're spread across the country. From I think our furthest west would be Phoenix, Vegas, and then we have people all the way to Florida and D.C.
Okay, so I'm in New Jersey, so if I wanted to contract you all, there's somebody relatively close. I mean, Washington, D.C. is a 4-hour ride.
I have one in D.C., and then I have a lady who lives in Pennsylvania.
Oh, that's close. That's close as well. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, again, thank you so much. I'm already following Athena's voice on social media. I'm following you. And I'm following you. I'm on Twitter with you and LinkedIn, so forth and so on. So I'll keep up with what's going on. And again, if anybody else in the organization, if they'd like to come on the show, if you know of anybody, if you know that would be a great interview person, or they don't have to be a great interviewer. If somebody that want to share their story, please let me know, because I've had a blast talking with you this morning.
Awesome. Likewise, it's been fun. You might be booked for a while if I send all my ladies your way.
Oh, that's all right. That's a good thing, because right now my calendar for this year is pretty much, I'm in the process of scheduling, so that will work for me.
Awesome. Well, I would love to help you out. It's been great talking to you.
Same here. All right. So that pretty much brings us to the end. You have a wonderful rest of your day, week, year, month, the whole nine. God bless. Continue to do what you do, and that you're absolutely on point with that, making life better for others. And as I'm a firm believer in that as well. And as long as that's the case, you will continue to be successful. There's no doubt in my mind there, because we're putting other people ahead of ourselves, which is really why we're here. And I truly believe not enough people. I'm not there. There are those of us out there like that, who think like that, but I don't think there's enough of us. So the more that folks understand that really we're put on the earth with a purpose, and that purpose is really to help somebody else, the better off we'll all be. All right. So again, thank you for your service. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for joining me this morning.
You are welcome. Thank you for your service. It's been great talking to you.
All right. Take care now. We'll be in touch. I'll get a copy of the link to you, and however you want to share it, whatever you want to do with it, is yours. Okay?
Sounds great.
Great.
Have a great day.
You too. Well, that ends another edition of the Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley. And like I said, I'm on cloud 9, because Tammy hit all the different levels: aviation, female, fighter pilot. Life is about helping others, not yourself. She hit every last one of them.